Okay, so kind of each question tries to capture like one element of it.
Hmm.
I didn't press record because I'm a professional. Yes, now we're recording.
Perfect. Should I clap again?
Oh, yes, you should. The video is gonna have like multiple parts, multiple segments. The first one will be the theory of love, what people think it is in terms of definitions or feelings. And then the second part would be the practicalities of it. So if you love someone or something, what do you do?
Yeah.
And then the third one is about sort of the events of love, so like personal stories. And the last question is more of a meta question about the project itself, which is like, okay, is this something that would be
That's useful and good and important. And
might just be an ending montage just to make it a bit interesting.
Sure.
And people have different opinions on that, which is also really interesting. And I always learn a bit. So yeah, the first one is more of the theoretical part. So how do you define love, and what does it mean to you personally?
Yeah, I thought about this question, and I think it's very difficult for me to define love, precisely because love can mean so many different things and comes in so many different forms. The love I have for my wife is very different from the love I have for my friends and family, is very different from the kind of love I can have for a good book or a good movie. And love to me is, in any case, a deeply personal connection that you feel with someone or something. That can be a place of comfort and a place of safety and intimacy. So that to me is I think the defining aspect of love. But how you experience that place of comfort and safety, I think, can be very different from one person to the next and one scenario to the next. I do also see that love can be something that's vulnerable. So I mentioned comfort and safety, but of course love also means opening yourself up to someone and really, I think, trying to be yourself with someone, which can be scary too. But I think in a mutually loving relationship, it's the comfort and safety that kind of prevails despite the vulnerability.
That's really good.
That's a good question. It's a surprisingly difficult question.
Yeah, no, but that was a surprisingly good answer.
So I think the definition question is particularly hard, in part because I don't think there's a single specific notion there. So there's a long history in philosophy of thinking about basically different kinds of love. So this is sort of outside my ballpark, but so we have things like romantic love, which is, well, we can talk about that. But there's also things like filial love, so love for your family, or a kind of virtue love where you basically something that you have with a really deep friend, where you make each other better people. And it's easy to think that there's some kind of similarity here, and there's definitely a kind of family resemblance. But I strongly suspect that they're not the exact same thing. So it's difficult to kind of define love generally. But if there is something that's kind of a common element there, it's other-directed care. And that's not going to be all of it, but that seems to be the common core between all of these things. It's always some kind of deep-seated care for the other person or other thing in its own sake or for its own value or kind of in and of itself. That's, I guess, the kind of core. Again, I don't think it exhausts the notion, but if there's something lurking in the background, I think it's something like that.
Oh, that's really interesting. So before we go to the practical part, this is kind of the practical part already, but what does it mean to care?
Yeah, oh God. I don't know. I think one again, difficult and very hard to pin down. But one thing that strikes me is that caring is going to be being willing to sacrifice something of yourself, be it even just time or a little bit of effort, money, whatever, for the other person's sake, just for the other person's sake. So, I might buy you a coffee because what I really want to do is to have 10 minutes to talk about video editing. Right? So then what I'm doing is I'm not really kind of caring for you in some way. I'm more transactionally using you. And unfortunately, I think a lot of relationships actually, for better or worse, tend to behave that way. Care is I hope, I think, other-directed, these sorts of actions without the alternative, or the kind of, alternative end invested there. So that again kind of ties in with this idea, if there is anything lurking behind all of these deep, dark concepts of love, I think it's something like this, like doing something for someone else without expecting payback, without a lurking end that you want to get to, a transaction behind it, something like that.
Okay, so it's kind of, I mean, from what I understand, it kind of has three parts or three elements. So it's like you give something of yourself. So it comes at somewhat at a cost. I mean, everything comes at a cost, but it's a cost that you're willing to pay.
Yeah, I think so.
And it's at some level for the other person's well-being or growth, happiness, whatever.
Yeah.
And then that is the end in itself, the other person.
Yeah, I think that's if there's a deep, dark kind of lurking thing here, it's something like that. And of course, that isn't to say that you couldn't do that and also have kind of transactional things on top of that too, right? I love my friend Alfred, but also a lot of times when we're hanging out, we're doing it because we want to have fun together, right? Or we're doing it because, hey, I have an idea and I want to bounce it off of you. Like, what do you think about this argument? Or what do you think about this paper idea? And I don't think having those on top of the kind of selfless exchange undermines the selfless exchange. But when the relationship is driven entirely by this sort of like transactional means, then they start to think some of that core love idea is being undermined.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I agree completely. Because you obviously do, you do talk about things with your friends and you do get something, but the core foundation is still
this other directed giving kind of thing. Yeah.
What should you do if you love someone? That's a really personal question as well, because I think love can mean different things to different peoples, and people have different sorts of relationships that they love each other in, and each of these different personalities and different relationships may come with different expectations of what you should or should not do. And as an ethicist, I think love is very precious. I think the world should be more loving, but I also think we should be somewhat reluctant in trying to prescribe what we should do when we love one another, because in that way love can also become sort of politicized sometimes. So if you truly love someone, you should do this, or if you don't do this, I guess you never really truly love that person. And to give you another type of example of a prescription in the domain of love that kind of scares me, not that long ago, society has held the fortunately now outdated belief that you can only romantically or should only romantically love persons of the same gender. And I'm glad we've moved away from that. But when you start talking about the language of what we should and shouldn't do, I think we should also be aware of the risks involved in trying to say that you should do something when you love someone. I will answer your question though, because of course I have views of what you should do when you love someone. And I will try not to contradict what I said just now. But I think in any case, when you love someone, you should follow the feelings and the instincts that reveal themselves to you when you're in that position of opening yourself up to someone. And when you, I think, take someone else's interests kind of as your own, because in love, you find one another, right? You become one. What that means though, right? That can be very different, I think, from person to person and relationship to relationship. What should you do what should I do now that I love my wife? I'm always there for her. I know she's there for me. I don't try to hide myself or aspects of myself. And I know she's trying to do the same with me. And I think in that meeting, you really listen to each other and care for each other and approach the world kind of as one.
what should you do for someone you love? So now it's more of like a practical thing that, in my mind, you will call it moral obligation or
Yeah.
responsibility. Some people find that too strong, but I would actually say that it's actually, it's almost like what is required of you if you dare say that you love someone.
Yeah, I think actually talking about it in terms of moral obligation it makes a lot of sense to me. And it's a moral obligation that you take on. So it's not kind of lurking. So we might have something like a moral obligation across the board to, not kill or to not lie to people in most circumstances, something like this. But the kind of caring or doing something for someone is a moral obligation that we take on by taking up the loving role. So that kind of phrasing makes sense to me. Now, what is it? What are you obliged to do? I think one thing to note is that there's not going to be a universal answer here, at least in any clear and distinct sort of, you need to do these actions. So cheap examples, does it include like paying for someone? No. Does it include like being there for them at every time whenever they feel bad? No. Just because there's going to be lots of variations in circumstance and things like this. But if there is any, again, common core, it's going to be something like, again, to come back to the same idea of doing whatever you think is best to promote their, let's call it, well-being. And doing this with the aim not of gaining anything or leveraging it in some way, but just because you want them to do well. So that's a vague answer, but I think that's probably the closest I can get to a good one.
It's pretty good. And it has to be vague because it has to make room for all the different circumstances that you could find yourself in.
Exactly.
It's kind of like the example that I really like is, if you're playing chess, you have a goal, but at every possible moment you have a different move to get to that goal.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like,
what do you do? Well, you make the best move.
Yeah.
What's the best move?
Yeah.
Well, it really depends on where you are.
Yeah. Like, it would be stupid to ask, what's the best chess move? That doesn't exist, right? So
yeah.
I think it's interesting.
So there's an interesting question here that I've done a little bit of thinking about, which is whether people can be friends with chatbots. So there's some literature on people being friends with things like robots, there's care robots and stuff like this, but chatbots are particularly interesting because there's no real embodiment there. But you do get people who, I don't know if you are familiar with Replica. It's this sort of AI-driven chatbot from your phone. Interesting history of how it developed there. People who really think they developed this loving relationship with Replica. And it's an interesting question there because typical philosophical characterizations of love require that there's mutual care going both directions. And as good as all these AI tools are, pretty sure they don't have anything like this sort of level of care directed back to the individual. So then there's already a kind of failing. It becomes almost like a one-directional love, an unrequited love, or something on the order of kind of the relationship you might have with your favorite YouTuber or something like this.
That's interesting, because that also happens, that people feel like they're in a relationship with someone who's online and they don't even know that they exist.
Yeah.
That is also a thing. Interesting. But then that wouldn't be love because it doesn't have that.
Yeah, the sort of reciprocity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to remember the phrase. There's a particular word for these sorts of parasocial relationships. That's what I was looking for.
Yes.
So parasocial relationships are kind of model examples of this asymmetric exchange where the viewer, let's talk about YouTube cases, the viewer feels this sort of, I love this person, I really care about them. But one, it's really unclear who the actual target of the emotion is. And two, No matter how many times the YouTuber says, "Oh, I love you guys. You're so great." Do they?
Press F to doubt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Can I share my answers?
Absolutely. I'd love to hear more. Yeah. Yeah.
I think so. For the second one, like what should you do for someone you love? In my head, it's kind of this idea of creating safety for the other person, and that allows them to become themselves.
Yeah.
So it's kind of this balance of, so there's the core of safety that you create with your actions and your words and your everything you do for them. And that can be little things like, I don't know, bringing them coffee or telling them you love them or calling them pretty. And then the effect of that is that the fears that they have or the issues that they have or the constraints that are, the things that are constraining their growth are lifted through that love and safety. And I think that allows the other person to become who they are and become more of themselves. It's kind of the spiritual aspect of it, actually. To me, love is inherently spiritual. It brings about spiritual growth in both the people involved in a healthy, loving situation.
I really love that answer. And I think it aligns a lot with how I view things. So you started out with the abstract as well. I think it's a place of comfort and safety, and you should create that space together wherein you can both be yourself and realize your potential. And then you also gave some concrete examples, right? This can come in different forms. It can be words of affirmation. I love you. You look great. Or it can be bringing them coffee, like that gesture that shows them, I'm with you here. I love that. And what I also love about your answer is that it allows for many different sorts of loving relationships. So we're talking a lot about partners and romantic partners. But when I love a friend, right, I can also try to create that space in the context of a friendship wherein they can be themselves. Or when I love a family member, or even, when you love just people in general, you can try to create that aura around yourselves of safety and social openness.
I think I really loved what you said about like the vulnerability part. I think that's kind of almost the price you pay, or kind of that's like the first step you have to take. And it's always kind of a risk.
Yeah.
Like you don't know what's going to happen, but I feel like that's kind of the price you pay. If it works, it's amazing. If it doesn't, it hurts. But I think that's still something you have to do.
That's a good way of phrasing it. The price to pay. That's what is scary about love. Is it is vulnerable because you're showing yourself in a way you're not showing yourself to others, and you're hoping, of course, that will be a mutual. But if it's not mutual, then that can be painful too, and it can feel like a betrayal sometimes. But I agree with you that it's a risk that is sometimes worth taking. Yeah.
But it's kind of, for me, it was loving someone meant that you want for them to be happy and to grow. So it was like these two elements to feel like a perfect balance. So it's kind of like general well-being, happiness, safety, but also growth. Yeah. So it's not like, I love you, stay the same.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That would almost be selfish, like a mother that, doesn't want their child to grow. But it's also not just grow. That would be almost cruel to want someone's growth without being kind to them.
I think that the selfishness point's a really good one there, right? Yeah. If what you really want is I just want you to stay like this, then it's not really directed at them. It's not about their well-being.
It's about your relationship to them.
It's transactional. And the kind of point about happiness, I think, is a good one. But I also think that there's going to be some cases where actually love requires making people unhappy. Because happiness is effectively just it's a response affect, right? It's, I'm happy because things are going really well and, the sun is shining even though it's going to rain in a bit and things like this. But happiness is very fleeting. And sometimes love, I would expect, is going to require like, hey, no, okay, this is not the happy time. This is the you fucked up. this is a bad time, but that's a good thing because, and this is where the growth point comes in. So, yeah, I'm broadly in agreement. I think it's just a minor quibble about whether it's happiness or something like well-being.
Yeah. No, but I completely agree. So you can't protect them from all sort of suffering either, because then you're actually undermining their growth and you're taking on.
Yeah.
That's just lack of boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, I mean, you mentioned the sort of a bad case of mothering a child or parenting a child. But there is something. So obviously parental love is going to be another kind of love, and it's different, very different from romantic love. But in those sorts of cases, it does almost seem like there's more of an element of, kind of protecting happiness as well as well-being, more than you might have in other cases, just because it's not entirely asymmetric, but it's much more dominated by the parental figure than the child, as to be expected, right?
Yeah.
So, it's an interesting kind of case.
I think love is fundamentally about unity, if that makes sense. And it's almost like the opposite of that is then separateness. And so a lot of things that are, you could say, morally not the best are things that you could feel like are pulling you apart, like, hatred or trying to feel superior than someone else. That creates a separation. Like a good example, like the main, at least in my view, the main difference between pitying someone and having empathy is it's like this.
Sure.
Right? It's like this is pity and then this is empathy. So it's kind of like unity and separation is this thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree about the kind of pity and empathy point. So one reason I'm a little bit hesitant to buy the whole description there of love as unifying is there might be cases where actually, again, loving someone is going to require actually kind of pushing them away. So what I have in mind here are cases where someone that you love is actually just genuinely toxic, and not in the kind of, we throw around this notion of toxic, but they're making things worse, and it would be better for everyone if they were away. And I also think maybe in a kind of similar sort of vein, I wonder about cases of, this is a funny phrase, but self-love, where what you're trying to do is actually come to terms with how you think about yourself, how you, in your own head, kind of relate to your behavior, the other ways you think about yourself and things like this. And there's a sense of unification, but it's less with the collective whole, if that makes any sense. So, I don't think those necessarily kind of raise deep problems for the notion that you were articulating. But it seems to me like they at least kind of give you fringe cases where some of these sort of unifying aspects start to fray a little bit.
I have another thing to say, and this is something I've been wanting to say as well. I think love is a place of vulnerability and opening yourself up to someone else. I think what you should also do is you should love yourself and respect your own boundaries too. That's important in any case, I think.
Yeah, and that's also quite interesting. Like, as I've been doing these interviews, we've kind of been talking about it in terms of the other person, but a lot of it kind of applies back to yourself as well, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's very natural to talk about the other, right? Because the other is sort of the object of love, right? The person you have this attitude of love towards. But I think we shouldn't forget about the importance of self-love too, right? Within limits. Because I think it can be easy also when you love someone to sort of lose yourself in a relationship because, well, maybe you put the other on a pedestal, or maybe you care so deeply about the other that you really want to do everything for them. But you also have your own limits and your own boundaries. And I think in a truly mutually loving relationship, you respect your own boundaries and that of your partner. And ideally, your partner does the same. And so self-love is important too. Yeah.
So love has like two elements to it. There's the unconditional core, and then like a conditional surrounding.
Sure.
So the core is kind of like, I love you no matter what. It's kind of like a mother loving her child, right? It's like, no matter what you do, I'm always here, and that creates like this sense of safety and calmness, and that allows the individual to be themselves, because I think it eliminates fear. So I think not being yourself might have some form of fear behind it.
Sure.
Because you think, I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or I'm not, it could be a bunch of things.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of safe, unconditional core gives you that, safety.
Yeah.
And the confidence to be yourself.
Freedom. Yeah.
And that will kind of connect to the happiness part of the equation. But then there's also this kind of conditional part, which is like, I love you, but there's also something that is required of you. So it's not everything is not unearned. There's something to earn as well. So like you as a teacher, of course you love your students, but you also want them to study and get a good grade, right? So there's like, I love you and I want you to feel good in my class, but
gotta meet me at least halfway. Yeah. Or
You
even just a quarter of the way. Come on, something, guys. Yeah.
So I think, and I don't know, I think self-love might also have those two elements to it. But
yeah, so I think this kind of comes back to the reciprocity point we were talking about a little bit earlier. So it might be that something like one directional love is unconditional, but for a genuine loving relationship to continue and maintain, it requires mutual self-care, right? So I care about you, you care about me, and what sort of breaking in those, as you were calling it, kind of conditional cases, is the reciprocity breaks down. Right? So then it becomes, you one way to go is you can say, okay, cool, it's no longer a genuinely loving relationship. There's this other directed care, but it's not coming back the other way. So the love has broken down. That's one way I think you could kind of describe the situation. Yeah, and I think that unfortunately just happens. And one way someone in that situation can respond is to just put more and more and more of themselves into it, right? We jokingly said like, oh, meet me at least like a quarter of the way. That's good in a way, and I think that's a valid response, but also that way very quickly leads to people just sacrificing themselves for things that aren't there. So I think, to put this in slightly nicer terms, there's also a lurking notion of something like, we'll call it self-respect or self-worth, that needs to kind of regulate that response. So I care about this other person. I care about them unconditionally. They're not reciprocating. I can still care about them, but perhaps I'm not going to do as many things as I did before, just because this sort of reciprocity relation has broken down. So the love has ceased, even though there's something like this one directional relation going. I don't know. I think there's something interesting and heavy lurking there, and it would be very good and valuable to articulate exactly how to behave in those situations, because I think unfortunately that's where a lot of us find ourselves, right? By hook and we're all horrible, selfish shits in various ways, except for my wife, obviously. But yeah, I guess the interesting practical questions are what to do in these kinds of cases where it's not like the contract has been violated, but the sort of response, the reciprocity has started to break down. I don't have good answers there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
If I did, I'd be paid a hell of a lot more.
I was reading a book about love, of course. It kind of shows that like romantic love is like two people becoming one, but the role of parental love is two becoming separate.
Yeah.
So like a mother and a child, for example, is the ideal mother would let her child grow up and become an individual instead of, keeping them
under their tutelage.
Yeah.
It's not too far off from what you hope goes on between teachers and students, right? You genuinely, what you want I want as a teacher is I want students to get better than me, right? Because that's kind of the point, right? I'm trying to drag people up to at least as far as I can get them, and then hopefully they will continue on better than I did. And I think that's not too dissimilar from this sort of like, okay, what we want to get to is we come apart and the kid goes on and does better things. Yeah.
That's a really good way to put it. Just drag them up, and that's really interesting.
Hopefully impart some inertia,
And that takes effort, right? That takes something of you.
Yeah, but that's a good thing. Like, that's a good thing. Otherwise, what else are the parts of you for?
Yeah. Wait, where was that? That was good. That was really good.
Well,
so the question goes like, can you share a significant experience or moment in your life that made you understand the power or nature of love? But for a lot of people, as I asked them this question, they were like, well, you asked me for one significant moment, and that's hard to pinpoint. So I kind of rephrased it as what reminds you of love from your life. So it can be a bit more open.
Well, I have a quite concrete and very cliched answer to this question, but it's the truth, and I feel it very intensely because it was very recent. So for me, it's very easy to pick one moment. I got married to my wife in December, so just a few months ago.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And my partner is from the United States. We got married, we celebrated our marriage in the United States with lots of friends and family from both sides of the Atlantic there with us to celebrate with us. And when we were standing at the altar, right, and we said yes to each other, I mean, what better moment can I pick? That really, I felt my love for her so intensely. It's really like we became one in that moment. And I know she felt the same way. The rest of the room melted away, and it was just our love. But then afterwards, right, during the celebrations and the reception, all our friends and family were there, or at least most of them were there. So then we were able to share that love with other people we loved, and that love us in return. So it was just one huge celebration of different types of love. And it was amazing. And as soon as I read that question, I was reminded of that moment. And I think if you ask me a year, 2 years from now, well, what does love mean to you? I'll think back to that moment as well. It just illustrates love in all its different facets, but also the love that I care most about right now, which is the love for my wife. Yeah.
Very cute. No, I mean, I saw you guys out there. You guys are very cute.
Thanks. How would you answer this question?
Yeah, I mean, I saw my family after 6 years in January this year.
Oh my God.
In the winter break, so that was pretty good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because in that time, my brother got married and had a kid. And even though I speak to them on the phone almost daily, I wasn't able to see them. Yeah. So like to go and meet like the baby, like my niece, and my parents after so long, because the last time I saw them I was 19 and I'm 25 now.
Right.
So it was like a long time of a lot of changes, and then you kind of have to reintroduce yourself.
Yeah.
Almost.
That seems like that's a great example, I think, right? Because you've been able to chat with each other and kept in touch, but like what reminded you of the love was when you saw them again and were able to really reconnect on that sort of more intimate, personal level.
Yeah, it's insane how much of a difference the physical presence makes, because you can talk on Zoom all you want, but it's really not the same.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah,
I think
must have been a good reunion.
Oh, it was great. Yeah, yeah. No, it was. It was only for 20 days because I had to come back to uni. But now that things are like better with me financially, I can kind of go back and forth. So it's like the doors are open now, which
Good.
is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that.
I think so. So yeah, I can think of a few moments, and they're all broadly the same type, and they all fittingly feature my wife, though also fittingly not directed at me. My wife is genuinely the best person I know, and one of the things that makes her so great is her genuine love for people and animals and things like this that are in really difficult situations. So there's been a number of times that I've been out walking with my wife and we've had appointments and things, and we've come across, for example, a bird that had been attacked by a cat. And so what my wife will do is then, okay, whatever we were going to do is now over. One of us will stay with the animal, try and comfort it as best we can. The other is going to go home. We're going to get our dog carrier box and we'll put the bird in the dog carrier box, take it home, put it in a safe, quiet place, call the animal sanctuary, pay for the animal taxi to come and pick the bird up and take it home. And this is for a pigeon. Right? Or we had a sparrow a few weeks ago that hit one of the windows at an apartment down the road. And I was walking to come to the office and said, I saw it and like, okay, normally, this is maybe telling how bad a person I am, I would have just kept going. I ignored it. But I thought, no, Amanda wouldn't let me do that. So called Amanda, who picked the bird up and took care of it for a little bit. And yeah, it turned out fine and flew away after a few hours of kind of giving it some calm and space. And I think these sorts of care for creatures in need, care for creatures that I think many people would just completely ignore, that's the sort of stuff to my mind that really is a deep, deep expression of love. It's sort of funny, again, thinking about like these random animals and how much my wife loves them. Me. But yeah, I think that's and the similar sort of thing is we've adopted several dogs over the last few years. We go to the dog shelter here, and my wife says, "Look, give us your oldest, your most broken, the one that's been here the longest, the one that just needs a home," and that's entirely her, right? And it's hard because it often means we get dogs that are psychologically difficult or medically difficult, and they cost a lot of money to take care of, but it's important and good, and that's a genuine expression of love in a way that I find really, really, really touching. So that's a rambly example, or kind of example, but yeah, there's a lot of those with her, and I think that's the sort of thing that comes to my mind when I think of love.
Yeah, I have some extra questions, but we will go to the last question first.
Sure.
So, yeah, this is the part where I usually tell people why I'm doing this. I'm gonna cry today.
It's okay. I was starting to tear up, It's fine.
I'm gonna cry. Yeah, I don't think I can do it.
That's okay. Don't make yourself do something you don't need to. But to answer the question, yeah, I do think it's a very important thing. I think thinking about the kind of nature of love and articulating it and actually, well, yeah. For two reasons. First reason is a general thing. It's always very good to stop and unpack the concepts that we use and lean on and think about and employ in our lives so much. We don't often. We just sort of use them and move on. And that's a genuine shame. And I mean, I would be a bad philosopher if I didn't say thinking about these kinds of things is really important. So that's one reason. But the second reason is that honestly, just are not forcing, that's too strong. Having people articulate, even for themselves, what they think about this core notion is good for them. It's good for us as people to think about, hey, how do I want to live my life? How do I want to embody this idea, this concept? So there's a good theoretical side and there's actually a good practical side. So yeah, I think it's an excellent project. I think it's a really important thing to do. For whatever reasons. I think just for the big reasons, I think those are enough already.
Yeah, I mean, technically we're done. We do have if you have a bit more time, I had some other questions that
Sure. Happy
that I
to.
wrote down as you were talking, so
Yeah, please.
I think they're just personal. Like they're more just for me, I guess.
Sure.
But how does one cultivate self-worth? Because you said it's this regulating body almost, and I thought that was very cool. I never thought of it that way. But it makes a lot of sense. So how does one who has had trouble with it?
Don't do that. I'll be real honest with you. I do not know. This is something I've struggled with. I mean, when I was in high school, I tried to kill myself. When I've dealt with depression my whole life. There are days where I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to be me. I regularly kind of talk to myself about like, oh, I'm fucking worthless and stupid. That fucking worthless moron. This is a mantra I repeat in my head occasionally. And I guess the best thing I've found to kind of help with this, and it's not a perfect solution, is to surround yourself with people who love you. And even just little things. The other side to that too is not just surround yourself with people who love you, because that sounds too selfish, but also to pour yourself out for other people. So that this kind of comes back to the thing about, look, what are we here for if not to kind of do stuff for other people? And the times when I feel like I'm most worthy are when I'm actually doing something for somebody else. It's not when get awards or publications or prizes or whatever. That always just makes me feel even more like, oh fuck, they're gonna find out that I'm a fucking moron. It's when I'm like, someone else is having a problem and I can help them fix it. That's when I feel like I'm actually worthwhile. So, in some sense, maybe the best thing to do to kind of cultivate the self-worth, and take this with a huge grain of salt, is to stop turning inwards and to turn outwards and do things for others. And in doing things for others, you find your worth, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I had the same conclusion. Yeah.
And I think, well, yeah, again, certainly not a psychiatrist or psychologist or anything like this, but the turning away from just thinking about yourself and this inward focus and making like, okay, what can I do? What can I do to help you? What can I do to help you? How can I, what's your difficulty? And let's think about how we can solve your difficulty. Now, of course, there's a problem there. This is, kind of back to the like burning yourself out or overextending yourself or something like this, but it's at least a place to start. So yeah, I don't know. That's it.
No, but that's a good answer. I kind of had the same hypothesis, but I lose myself in the other person.
Yeah.
Which is
That's a difficult thing. That's a difficult thing too. And I think one thing, again, if we kind of come back to the opening question about how to characterize love, it's something about mutual self-care, or not mutual self-care, kind of mutual other-directed care. And in order for that to really work, so this is way back, this is sort of Aristotelian characterizations of love. In order for even that kind of care for the other to get going, you have to put yourself in a position where you can actually send the care out. And you can mess that up either by just never really kind of stopping thinking, kind of constructing a house, right? Or by radically overextending yourself. And there's a delicate balance between reaching out, doing things for people, directing your care to others, and giving absolutely everything away and leaving yourself with nothing to work with. How to balance that? But yeah, what other questions or things?
So this question is kind of a meta question, because I was kind of thinking, okay, so it's a question about the documentary itself. So do you think it's important to attempt to define love / have conversations about it? What are your thoughts on that?
I have a yes and a no answer, and yes, I love your project. I think it's an important project, and I think it's great that you're interviewing so many people to get a look at this topic that we all care about from so many different angles. The no aspect of it is that this ties in with an answer I gave earlier. I think it can also be risky to try and define love and pin it down and say, this is what love is. Because if you give that sort of answer to the question, then I think you risk excluding other forms of love that might still matter a lot to other types of people. So if you emphasize romantic love and you say love should have this romantic connection, then you sort of marginalize more platonic forms of love. Or if you say that love should be selfless, then I think you minimize the importance of self-love, which can be an important foundation of different types of loving relationships. So the risk in trying to define love is that you exclude other forms of love. However, what I think is great about your project is that you're not really doing that. You're talking to so many different people, which is actually a great way of showcasing how love can mean different things to different people. So rather than trying to sort of pin it down and saying this is what love is, the result is a celebration of love in its diversity. So that's what I love about the project.
Thank you. Do you think that some things are like beyond explanations or beyond words, and that they can, like my experience so far with love has been that that is beyond like a mathematical definition, that it can only be experienced or expressed through art.
Mm-hmm. Right. Oh, that's interesting. Can you say a little bit more about that? Why art?
I think art gives you an expression without a definition.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, a good poem or a good song. I love music, and it gives you, it somehow gives you a definition without constraining it.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow gives you what you're looking for in that moment, and it can mean different things to different people. There's something, I don't know, objective and subjective about it at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of holds up a mirror, and I'm quoting other people. Two of my friends said the same thing. They said art is like holding a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So good art helps you get to know yourself, or to recognize yourself in the art. And I think expressing something through art doesn't constrain it, but it gives you a lot still. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely, I think I agree with you that there are things we cannot easily express in words. And I think a large aspect of love as a phenomenon is something that's hard to capture in words, precisely because it's felt, and we keep talking about a comfort space or a safe space, but within that space we feel all sorts of things that might be hard to express. So I agree with you there. We can try to approach that in these conversations, or try to conjure up images, whether through art or through the examples that you've asked for, that can remind us of what love feels like and is. But I do think you're right. There's always an aspect that we don't capture in words. And I think art can capture that aspect, right? Because art also tries to express things that are hard to capture in words. So in that sense, I think looking at a beautiful painting can evoke all sorts of feelings that will be hard to define exactly. Yeah. So I think we're on the same page here, more or less.
Yeah, I think even with this video, I kind of what my aim is that. So at no point in the video am I going to define love, but rather you're just going to see like 3 to 4 hours of people just talking about it from very different perspectives, different ages, and there will be something. I've already started editing, so I already remember all the clips. It's kind of like everything is so subjective, like everyone's experience of love and their story is so personal. Yet when you watch it together, it has a general theme.
Yeah.
It's like the answers are kind of converging to a general area.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah, you're painting a mosaic almost, right? You have all these different little tiles, and they look slightly different, but they fit together in some way, and there is sort of a bigger picture that forms when you look through the lens of all these different stories and these different tiles. Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's really interesting. That makes me think that there is something universal or objective about it, but at the level of people, it can be very personal.
Yeah.
But that if you abstract it enough, there is something core about this phenomenon.
This is outside of the context of the video, but there is a philosopher called Ludwig Wittgenstein, and he's a philosopher of language. So he asks what the meaning of words is. And his answer in a nutshell is, well, meaning is use. So what a word means, what love means, is revealed through the ways in which we use the word love. And we use it to refer all sorts of things, right? And that's what a definition of love is. But he also says there's a lot of words that don't have sort of like one meaning, one definition, but that are related to sort of a family resemblance of different meanings. So what does that mean? Well, if you try to define what a game is, there's so many different types of game, and they don't have one thing in common that makes them a game, right? Some games have rules, others don't. Some are competitive, others aren't. Some you play in teams, some by yourself. You cannot come up with one definition of what a game is. But when you look at all these different sorts of games, there is a family resemblance that starts showing itself, right? They have things in common. There are overlaps between all these different sorts of games. And maybe love is also sort of like a family resemblance concept like that. If you look at all the different forms of love and the ways in which love gets expressed and experienced, maybe there is not one defining aspect of love, but there is a lot of overlap between these different forms of love. And that is sort of that bigger picture that you're starting to see now in your video. Just reminded me of it.
Yeah, no, that's going to be in the video. I think that's quite interesting. Yeah. And that aligned with my experience already so far. How does one find a good woman?
Well, and one thing to say, right? Not everyone is looking for good women, right? You know, there's good person. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I was more talking from my perspective.
Sure.
Yeah. Like, how does one
find a good partner?
Yeah.
Or partners. I mean, there's some people who are in that way. I don't know. I think I got tremendously lucky. And I think the biggest thing is there's the Maya Angelou quote that I really like about if someone tells you what they're like, listen to them. and the best way I know to read that is you see how people act, how they really act. And that tells you something about their character. I don't really like that notion, but it tells you about what they're like. And then find the people who have the sort of character that you wish you had. Maybe that's the best advice I can give there. yeah, as I say, my partner is genuinely just one of the best people I know, and not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Important to say that she's not perfect, but just has this love for others that I find so. I wish I was more like that, and so that was one of the things that really kind of drew me there. So yeah, watch people in little activities. There's the jokes you see this sometimes about like how does your date treat wait staff? Like that's a really good indication. Like, do they treat them as real human people, or are they just sort of means to ends?
Yeah.
It's the little things. But yeah.
What should I look for in a person in terms of romance? So like, what should I look for in a woman that I want to commit to and be with the rest of my life?
I don't know if I can answer that question for you, because it is such a personal question.
Yeah.
I think it depends on who you are as a person, and I think also your needs in a relationship. But not only your needs in a relationship, right? It will also depend on the needs of the other person that you're looking for, that you don't yet know who it is.
Yeah.
So I think it's only in the encounter with someone else that you can start answering that question for yourself, right? By getting to know that person, you know yourself quite well, and I don't think there's some abstract advice I can give you. I think it will really depend on that meeting, and it will entail taking a bit of a risk. I think, right,
Yeah.
for the reasons we talked about, it can be scary.
Yeah.
It was very scary for me to open myself up as well. But at some point, I think you feel that there might be something, and maybe if you feel that, maybe that's an invitation to try and open yourself up a little bit, and only then you will know. I think. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not a great matchmaker.
No. I think, yeah. Maybe if I rephrase your answer, and I could be wrong, but what I'm kind of trying to extract from that is, okay, maybe the kind of person that invites me to be vulnerable, that I meet them and I'm like, I can be vulnerable with that. Maybe that's a good starting point or something.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point, and I think so. I would also emphasize the other direction. I think the right way. Well, I think right the right way to approach a relationship like this is not just thinking about what they can offer me and whether I can be safe and comfortable with them, but also whether that can be a mutual thing, right? So what can I offer them, and is this a relationship, a sort of an equitable relationship in which we can give each other what we need to be safe and comfortable. And sometimes you might feel very comfortable and safe with someone, but not the other way in return. So I would emphasize that part of love as well. That comes from two directions, ideally.
Yeah. You're very articulate. It's very.
Thanks.
I think you're really. Yeah. No.
It's a lot of practice, a lot of lecturing, a lot of.
I can tell. You're like, yeah, really. It's amazing.
You're asking good questions, right? Questions that are open, but still sort of gesture in a particular direction. So you know where to go, but you have a lot of freedom, and then you follow up very nicely.
That's good. Yeah, I'm trying to, because like the first interview I did was horrible, and it was kind of. Hopefully, it's getting better.
And it helps to have some questions in advance, and not all of them. That is also helpful, but primes you to think about this before the interview. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
I think we're done. I mean, your answers were so complete that I can't think of a lot to ask. You're like, it's just very articulate, very well put.
Oh, thanks, Ansar. And like I said, I love the project and I love being here. So best of luck with with putting it all together and answering this quest for what love is.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I mean, we're kind of done, I think, with the questions.
Sure. I hope that was useful, helpful.
That was amazing. That was.
Sorry, it wasn't super articulate, and
No, that was really good. I was I also just wanted to say that like everyone really enjoys your classes.
Oh, that's great.
That like everyone. I mean, even before I started CSI, I knew someone and she was second or third year, and she just told me, "Oh, Nathan is the best. You'll do his class." And I heard that from like multiple people.
That's very sweet.
And I think it's really sweet as well. And to me, this is also an aspect of love and like genuine care. The way you kind of usually in the beginning of the class, you ask people, "Do you want a longer class? Like, do you just want to skip the break and end early,
Sure.
or do you want to?" I think that is genuinely to me an expression of love. And then the way you kind of check up midway, "Are we doing okay?" Like, I mean, it takes 2 seconds,
Sure.
but I think that it really makes a difference. You know, the jokes as well, of course.
Sure.
I think all of that creates this kind of loving and safe environment. And even if people don't necessarily enjoy logic, they enjoy the class.
I think I'm tremendously lucky in terms of to be honest, the topic really is great. Absolutely love it. And I know there's a lot of people who get put off by it. But the nice thing is it's very clear. It's very clear progression-wise. And at that point, really, a lot of my duties... I mean, there's content delivery, which I'm very concerned with and I want to do the best. But a lot of it is basically making sure that people kind of have the right kind of attitude, feel okay about it, don't feel overwhelmed. I'm going to call it emotion regulation. That's not the right word. But I think that's a core part of teaching something like mathematics or programming or learning a language or formal logic, which is in that same kind of vein. So I think I see a big part of my role in that class in particular as something like kind of coach. So I'm glad that comes through. But I'm very lucky.
Well, it really comes through. I just wanted to say that I'm pretty sure I speak on behalf of a lot of people, because I knew about you before I even started logic, and I was
That's good or bad?
good, good things.
Oh, sorry.
I knew about you and the dogs before
that's good.
knew much, but
yeah,
I just wanted to say that.
No, well, thank you. That's very nice. Cool.
Well, we're practically done. That was really good.
Yeah, no, thanks for talking. And obviously, if there's any more questions you have or anything else that I can do to help, let me know.
Sure.
And I'd be really curious to hear how it goes, and very interested to see how it all works out.
As soon as it's up, I will send you the link and you will get to watch it. Yeah,
cool.
100%.
And feel free, edit whatever.
I can use all of that?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
And I mean, do not feel worried about, fixing pauses or when I kind of stumble.
Yeah. I want to keep it a bit raw as well. I don't want to edit so much to make it like this. Yeah.
Sure.
I want to keep it.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem, man.
That was really good.